My friends, it is not every day that people can organize a 4v4 team battle with the massive unit variety and over-the-top action that Warhammer brings to the table. So when it happens, when the stars align and the world marches to war, the only thing we can do is sit back, crack open some Bugman's XXX brew, and enjoy the show. Lore friendly? Absolutely not. Zankanaz and Azrai, Ratmen, and Men of the Empire working together, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because most of them are going to be dead by the end of this replay anyway. So one side, the Vampire Counts, Wood Elves, Dwarves, and Nagarythe are working together to face down the Dark Elves, Empire, and the Under Empire. So you know, we're in for a pretty crazy battle. And hell must have frozen over, because the Dwarfs and Elves are fighting side by side, as we know, haven't been on the best of terms for the better part of 3,000 years, but it could be that the power of friendship is stronger than the power of grudges, or the very notion could be going in the book. Transformation of Khadon has summoned a friendly neighborhood feral manticore, and if you want evidence of why they are complete trash, look no further. Rampage kicks in, like 5 seconds after it hits the field, sends it careening into a bunch of slayers, just licking their lips in anticipation, and it's gonna go down faster than a hooker with a mortgage. Brutal. Sisters of Avalorn volleys just absolutely eviscerating it, and the vampires are running a cavalry train right up the center into the teeth of the Dark Elf defense. Hydras and Executioners and even some Black Guard taking the brunt of that assault. And Fire Breaths reaching out of the woods, smacking some good boys in the face. Direwolves going down there. And this is not going to be a good attack for the Vampire Counts at all. That's a lot of armor-piercing and heavily armored dudes to be charging from the front. But we'll check back on that in a bit. Vampires and Clan Pestilence have committed in the center, while the Wood Elves support. Doomwheel getting into the back of some Grave Guard, and a Prey of Anathrema going down, lowering that missile resistance and allowing those Starfire Shafts to get some really brutal volleys in. And already that Doomwheel looking a little bit worse for the wear, but a cavalry fight is brewing here. Empire Knights moving up to greet the Wild Riders of Kurnus head on, and some of those Knights got caught flat-footed, didn't get their charge off. It's not actually a fight I'd recommend for the Wood Elves though, without the support of some Eternal Guard or Azrai Spears. They might win that fight, but they are still pretty squishy, those Wild Riders. I think their mobility could be better used than charging headfirst into Armored Knights early on. But the Hellstorm rocket batteries, raining death from above. You can see a Hydra running there from some Blood Knights who managed to beat the crap out of that monster. And it is complete bedlam already. We're like 3 minutes in, and already all over the field, troops are getting committed, artillery crisscrossing, huge explosions going off everywhere, and a lot of tracer fire from those Starfire Shafts as the Glade Guard get pounded into the dust and the snow with some really precise mortar fire. Kind of surprised the mortar's able to hit that accurately from that far away, but Greatsword is taking a lot of armor-piercing damage in the center there as they move up, and Wild Riders already running. They'll probably come back, but they took a beating on the way in there from all that Empire Knight cavalry. They're getting a flanking charge into the side. Eternal Guard holding the line here, which is exactly what they're meant to do, and that Glady looking to line up a breath attack and letting it rip into the center of some swordsmen. Gonna do a lot of damage there. A lot of red getting spewed up into the air as the Hellstorm rocket batteries continue their firing, but Cold One Chariots busting through the center of the Nagarythe and Dwarf line, and Manticore, another one summoned by Transformation of Khadon, on top of the Sisters of Avalorn now. Hydra trying to line up a breath attack, and here it comes. That's gonna do a lot of damage. Fire ripping through the center of those elite archers, and honestly, right here, I would just love to see a Wind of Death that destroyed that Nagarythe blob of spearmen and swordsmen. That could be absolutely beautiful, lined up perfectly, but they will commit. Azure Spearmen and the Puremain Company charging forward as Murderous Prowess pops for the Black Guard and the Executioners of Hargoneth. I bet you Nagarythe will be able to win that melee fight though. They seem to have a lot more in that immediate vicinity. Dark Elves already taking some damage from the cavalry charges. Hammer is getting committed. Lord Skrulk in the center, just spreading the word of the Plague Lord, making sure that everyone understands the Great Horned Rat is in the ascendancy, and the Empire committing a lot there. Awakening of the Wood on top of some Clan Rats trying to run down the Glade Guard in the back, and an entire Empire player actually sitting all the way back defending all the artillery, which isn't the worst idea. In a game like this, if you allow artillery to fire for the majority of the game, that's gonna do a lot of damage if you think about it, right? They've got their pick of the litter in terms of targets to shoot at. Blood Knights have been committed in the center here, so no hammer and anvil for them, but if they can get their hands on that Doom Wheel, their lances and their armor-piercing buff, which they did get one in the latest patch. They are better against armor now. Could definitely do a lot of work against that. Hydra, trying to get some regen, and it should be able to get quite a bit of that. More cannon batteries in the back, firing in, providing that long-range sniping support. And the backline for the Elves, Dwarfs, and Vampires already looking a little bit thin, but it could be filled out very nicely by Alathanar and Nagarythe once they manage to finish off these odious Druki on the far side of the battlefield. Even though those are Blackguard and Executioners, they are completely surrounded, outnumbered, outgunned, and I think the Dark Elves need to pull whatever they can out of that fight and go link up with the rest of their team, because they dead. I mean, Chariots can do a little bit here if they manage to get a flanking charge off, but they might be bucking it. Cold Ones no longer one a part of that action boss. And yeah, now the Dwarfs and Nagarythe bringing back what they have to link up with the rest of the team. But the Wood Elves have completely crumbled on the left flank. They basically got 2v1 by artillery and melee troops from both Empire players. That has allowed the Empire to roll the flank. They're streaming in from the Void led by the Azrai Dead and a Hydra with a beautiful breath attack into the middle of the Hammers, who are moving up now. Really high value target. Really good use of that breath attack there. And with a spell coming in, that will be a net of Ammontok and a lot of Sisters of Avalorn nearby. That's going to be a good use of it. Make sure those monsters get off the field. You don't want a terror-causing breath attack. I mean, think about what breath attacks can do in a 3v3 or 4v4 like this. It's a lot more likely you're going to get blobbed up. So Hydra's probably a great 3v3 or team battle in general kind of unit, because those breaths could absolutely destroy a blob. And with some focus fire from those sisters, Hydra will pretty much go down here, and it has hit the regen cap, so whether it comes back or not, it won't really make any more impact on this battle, I don't think. But the Dwarfs, using those Runesmith abilities in the center to buff up armor, make sure that everything in the center can keep fighting. Vampire Lord on his last legs, he has taken a lot of damage, and the mortars and the Empire and Plague Claw Catapult Artillery destroying those Sisters of Avalorn, and that's a very high value target again for those Empire Artillery. You want to make sure they're off the field, because in a big blob like that, those archers, if they're focus firing anything, it will just die. I mean, there's nothing in the game that's going to stand up to multiple volleys of high AP, high magical, and flaming attack damage. Very accurate, just snipers from long range. Only if you have really high magical resistance are you going to not really care if Sisters of Avalorn are firing into you. So, yeah, that's a really good target for the Empire to take down. And now the entire battle lines have completely shifted. What was a north-south affair has now shifted to east and west as a Pure Main Company charge in. And they're going to be able to do very well against these great swords and swordsmen, no problem whatsoever. Pretty much an ideal engagement for them. They're going to slice through them, and it looks like the Lord General for the Empire actually went down on his Barded Warhorse to Ungrim Ironfist, the Slayer King, who's charged forward, and the Axe of Dargo found its mark, bisected him in two. A little bit redundant there, but what it has done is made sure that a lot of those Empire troops have started running for the hills. There's a huge mass rout going on right now with the Lord General dead. Big morale shock, even some Skaven troops wavering with the loss of their beloved Empire General. And what it means is, what was a battle that looked pretty clearly in the Empire's favor is now not looking as good for them when they've got that many troops running. If the Elves, Dwarfs, and Zanganaz can kind of rally here, push forward, and run down some of those routing troops, with Alathanar getting some good shots in from his Moonbow, that could be huge and swing the tide back in their favor a little bit. The Cryptors doing, I mean, that's just a nightmare to fight, right? You think about that. A Dwarf shield wall backed up by Cryptor support is pretty nasty. But one really great way to deal with it is have a bunch of Hellblaster volley guns just target the Dwarf infantry phalanx and shoot it to pieces. And that's exactly what's happening right now. These Dwarfs are getting shredded from long range by those Hellblaster volley guns, which are really good against armored targets. They've received quite a few buffs. I mean, I remember when the game first came out in Total War Warhammer 1, absolutely trash, just absolutely atrociously bad, but they have been consistently buffed over multiple patches now to a point where they can be very good for you, and I think I've seen a lot of Empire players bring them recently, and that's a lot of DPS to be focusing on those Dwarf Warriors in the center, and the Cryptor is not having a good time on the receiving end of that either. But the Elven Phalanx is charged forward now, taking on the Empire Swordsmen. Pure Main Company still in there, doing a lot of damage, and the Glady on the prowl, getting some good shots into what looks like some artillery crew with her bow. She needs to be careful, though. There are handgunners firing into her, and she doesn't have a lot of health left, taking a lot of damage from those armor-piercing missiles. Breath attack coming forward now into the spearmen, and overshots going directly into the Hellblaster volley gun crew. And that's just going to leave Paste on the other end. That soporific breath. Pretty powerful, and it's going to hurt the Empire player for sure. So Maya-san's to few of those guns. Mortar's getting some very low arcing trajectory shots into the Elven phalanx that is moving up now. I'm not sure where Alathanar is, but his spearmen definitely not having a good time as those explosive shells find their mark. And the dwarves in the center with Ungrim Iron Fist at the helm with some Cryptor support. They seem to be winning, but you can just see this is a hill where many have died and made their last stand. That's just a lot of dead dwarfs on the receiving end of those Hellblaster volley gun volleys. Pretty painful right there. Another fight actually brewing out on this side now. Alathanar with a handful of hammerers. That is really cool looking. Backed up, actually surrounded by some clan rats, maybe some storm vermin, and a archlector and an amber wizard. Lord Beastcasters look so goofy, man. Like, they're trying way too hard to let everybody know how much they love nature by wearing the skin and horns of dead beasts. Tone it down, buddy. But that looks awful for the Shadow King. Hammers break, Alathanar wavering, and I'm not sure he's going to escape. But somehow, some way, Wood Elves are resurgent over on the other flank. Skeleton crew of tree huggers have surged forward and are now running the Empire towards the edge of the map. And this could be completely game-changing. If they can somehow prevent them from rallying and presenting another united front again. Wood Elves are a bit like CD Projekt Red there. Pretty good on the wild hunt. Yeah, that was bad. I'm sorry. Who else, by the way, is excited for Cyberpunk 2077? That game is looking pretty cool. It's looking pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, they're gonna be able to run down the Empire, maybe, while Alathanar on this side is being hounded by a Dreadlord, Executioners, and some Empire state troops. And over here, Dwarfs and Nagarythe still somehow alive, even after the pounding they've taken from the Empire artillery crew. But Wood Elves, the War Dancers, this is what they're meant for, man. This is exactly what they are designed to do. Carve through lightly armored stuff and run them down with their fast speed, and decapitations going off everywhere. Those dual blades, the Tricksters of Loak, too much for the Empire to handle over there. And J-Monster and the remnants of his Wood Elf stuff moving up to try to support what remains on the other side. But Shadow King, more like a dead boy. I don't think he's going anywhere. Blackguard going to stop him from moving, and that will be the final blow, I think. Yeah, he's dead. Cold One Chariot, and I think maybe a Lore of Lifecaster managed to finish him off. If not, it was a Lore of Beastcaster. Pure Main Company still around, though. Archlector in the middle of the Azure Spearman Horde. And Empire still somehow alive. The other player who sat in the back with the artillery crew for a big portion of the game still has some infantry troops left over, and that might play a big factor as we move towards the very late stages of this battle. Spearmen fighting to the death here. Halberds in the flank of the Pure Main Company, and even some Slayers thrown in there for good measure. Not many of them left. But the Archlector and that Lore Beastcaster are working on Ungrim now, and he has only a sliver of HP. I don't know how long he can survive, but with that Axe of Dargo, he is ideal as a counter for those mounted heroes and lords. We got some Quarrelers firing into the flank of some Empire Halberdiers, and that's a nice target for them. They are painting the town red with some close-range bolts right there. Cannons still around, and that might be the biggest factor in the entire game so far. That artillery has been unmolested for the entire game. That is a big deal when you think about artillery using all of their ammunition. Runelord and Ungrim making their stand here, and can Ungrim finally be greeted with a glorious death? Surrounded by his enemies, yes, a attack from an Executioner actually will bring the Slayer King down, and that will wrap up that entire flank and allow them to begin collapsing in on what remains for the Wood Elves and the Dwarfs, and the balance bar has shifted pretty heavily in the Empire's favor after that. But I think Karnas and the Wood Elves might still have a little bit of trickery up their sleeves with some nice decapitations on those War Dancers, anchored by a Branch Wraith. They will have some leadership buffs there, which is pretty important. But the question is, can they close the gap before that artillery can completely send them screaming into the afterlife, screaming into oblivion. It's going to be tough. Archlector in the thick of it now, kicking some dwarfs around, stomping them into the snow. And those dual hammers of Sigmar looking so epic. And it's been surprising. I haven't actually seen any casting from that beast caster at all. But it seems like he's done a lot in melee too. Plague Monks fighting some Quarrelers, and that's just brutal. That is not something that you want your dwarves to ever have to deal with. Bonus versus infantry, more than enough to carve through them, and the Quarrelers will start running for the edge of the map. Wood Elves are going to have to close the gap here, and they're pretty much the last bastion of hope for the vampires, dwarfs, and elves in general. But actually, no, Nagarythe is a bit resurgent on this side too. You got the Pyramid Company and some Spearmen finally, after what's been about 15 minutes, silencing the gun crews, but with a Cold One Chariot charge coming in from behind. That's brutal. Scything blades and very angry raptors. Life finds a way. It's gonna cause a lot of death instead. And these Azure Spearmen having a very bad time, charge from behind, wavering, and with the support from the Dark Elf caster, that will be the end of them, which will leave J-Monster and the Wood Elves as the only player left on the field, and they may not be able to win it, but a Melkos mystifying Miasma will certainly cause some wavering and maybe even some routing here as the War Dancers charge in, and this is an interesting fight. I mean, this is about as brutal as infantry engagements can get, right? When you think about two very low armored units going at it like this, very high damage, very high DPS. You've got Glade Guard, you've got War Dancers, and you've got Plague Monks fighting it out, and that is a lot of blood on the ground. Glade Guard gonna get some of their cool shooting animations in from close range, but it looks like the Empire, Under Empire, and the Dark Elves will be in the ascendancy here and be able to seal the deal as the Wood Elves make their final stand. Another charge coming into the Halberds, getting some good shots in, but that will be the end. And yeah, I think probably the biggest thing for the Empire players in general, they use reserves very nicely, actually. The second Empire player decided to not really commit any of his melee troops or any of his important ones until later in the fight. That allowed them to very easily protect their artillery, and I can't think of any of their artillery. Well, I guess the Plagueclaw Catapult and maybe, yeah, the Great Cannons we saw at the beginning were shut down by the Dwarf counter battery crews, which was actually a very nice play from the Dwarfs as well. They did a very nice job counter battering some of them, but all the artillery that was more on the right flank for the Empire was able to fire for pretty much the entire game. And you really cannot allow arty, that much arty. When you think about how much was on the field there, we got multiple Hellstorm rocket batteries, Hellblaster volley guns, Great Cannons, all that. Mortars, just a lot of damage if they're able to fire for that long. And it's part of the problem is that it's hard to shut those down when you're thinking about a map that's this big, when you're thinking about 4 armies on the other side. How do you get at their artillery relatively easily? You can't really. They have so many troops on the field that arty's just going to be a really good investment, and we saw it there. I think one thing that would have really benefited the Vampire team was not losing all that Vampire cavalry so early on. I think a lot of people look at something like Executioners and they maybe remember Shogun 2 or some other games and say, yeah, we could totally do like a frontal charge and this would be awesome and work really well. It can work for some factions in some instances, but especially with Vampire Cavalry, I don't really recommend it. I think saving that cav till a later stage where the battle lines kind of break down could have been really big and allowed the Blood Knights and the Black Knights to rack up quite a bit of kills on the artillery and shut those down. But yeah, I mean, it was a really fun one. Thank you a lot to J-Monster for sending this one in. He does have his own channel, a lot of Third Age Reforged content that I'd recommend checking out. But yeah, these are fun, man. Like, the 4v4 battles are a blast to watch. And this is Warhammer right here. This is exactly the kind of battle that I love to watch. So, hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I'll see you next time. Indie Pride, signing out for now.